Coming into this moment, we breathe in. And here we are. So for those of you joining us at home, I highly recommend listening and following along with the lyrics before you listen to this sermon. Love the Way You Lie by Eminem featuring Rihanna. So we just listened to that song because today's topic is about mastery of emotion and what is mature love. And so that's a really powerful song, especially if you read along with the lyrics. So let's take a deep breath. Coming into this moment once again. Grounding ourselves into the here and now with some beautiful, delicious presence. So something I want to just start by saying is, I'm sure many of us can relate to this, but one of the leading factors that causes micro suffering, not the macro necessarily in the expanded world, but micro suffering, is love. And if you really think about it, and maybe you can even relate to this in your own relationships that you've had either presently or in the past, and still to come, since some of us may fall into that routine again, that happens to many of us, is when we get into the loving attachment and we add in the hormones and the lust and all that fun stuff and the ego, sometimes it manifests the absolute worst qualities about ourselves. And again, worst is a judgment. I don't prefer using that word, but let's use a different vocabulary there. It often manifests as the most abusive qualities about ourselves, where we can become that tornado, we can become that volcano, and in the loving someone, we just completely lose our mind. We lose our shit from time to time. Or maybe we're not necessarily being abused in that situation, but we allow ourselves to be abused in those situations out of codependency. So there's so many ways in which this idea of love manifests on our planet. And again, a lot of it is not necessarily consciously our fault. Consciously our fault in the sense that many of us were taught this from a young age. And every time you turn on the television, it's starting to change slightly now, but every time you turn onto the television or watch a movie or the news, or even listening to songs, you're always being bombarded with these unrealistic expectations of what love actually is. And for a very long time, what was fascinating is that it actually was being presented as an image. It was a very marketable image that love will just take all of your pain away. Love will make you feel complete. Love will make you feel at home in the world. Love will make you love yourself. And sometimes this even goes into having children. I've heard so many people over the years that says, well, at least my children love me. Ooh, that's some abusive shit right there. Because if you have that attachment, then your identity is being attached to being a parent. And then once they actually grow up and then they start to hate you for a while, not always, but there's definitely always that schism that occurs when the child leaves the nest. And then you start to feel that emotion like your sense of love and your sense of purpose is leaving you. And that is all a mental construct that you decided to a long time ago out of an idea of not necessarily being a good parent, but an idea of codependency and what you think love is meant to be. And so it's really important with this idea of mature love that we're constantly evolving and growing as we're also evolving and growing, and the people and relationships around us are changing. And so think of a time in your own life where you've held on a little bit too long, and the longer you held on, the worse it got, because you were so afraid of change. You didn't want this to change. Even though it was a shitty thing, you were still attached to it in some way because something was better than nothing. And this is a huge epidemic that often is not being talked about on our planet, and what causes so much suffering, not only for individuals, but for families alike. When I married Andrew, and even the idea of marriage, I always said, if I'm ever going to marry someone, it will be because our lives together make the world a better place. Our lives together make the world a better place. Not just because I want to be with someone that I have passion with. I want to make sure that our union is actually being of benefit to not only us, but everyone around us. Because a lot of times when we're very selfish with the idea of love and marriage, we get together with someone that we have something with. We won't even put a label on it, but there's something there. And a lot of times it's not that great. And it's often abusive. And then it causes drama. And then you tell your family and your friends about it, and you're spewing this drama into everyone's lives around you. And so truthfully, that conjoining of two individuals is not making the world a better place. It's alleviating whatever hole you have that you feel that you have within yourself. And you like that presence. And we're so desperate for connection that we settle for these abusive and emotionally draining and dramatic connections, rather than taking the time to really do the peace work and to really show up in the world and be of service to the world, rather than constantly needing it to almost like be an addiction to where it takes the edge off. I remember even in my own past, I just loved to just be with someone to just, after a very long and stressful week, I would just like kick off my feet and just be like, oh, and just lay on them. Well, that was a dependency. Because again, it was the idea of just, I just want to shut my mind off and I just want to have some fun. I just want to have some pleasure and just relax. But the truth is, you could never get enough of it. And then it led to an unhealthy addiction. And then it led to more and more and more and more. And so what's fascinating about most of the people I've dated in the past and relationships I had that were based on passion, ours from the day one was based on peace. And it's fascinating that in all the time that we spent together, there's not been one argument, not one negative word spoken towards the other. It's always been about understanding and respect. And it almost seems like a unicorn. It's like, does that even exist? Because it's so hard to wrap our mind around that you don't have to yell in relationships. You don't have to be called negative, belittling things. You don't have to call your partner belittling or negative things. You don't have to freak the fuck out. And you can actually develop relationships with people that are based on listening and understanding and compassion. But here's the catch. It's not your fucking job to teach it. It's your job to live it. But a lot of people, they think that they can just teach it once they're dating someone and or in whatever type of relationship with someone, and that they're gonna meet you right there. But all of a sudden, you created this, where you're now up here, or doesn't matter which direction you're in, but now you're conjoined with this person, and everything that they are do is going to somewhat influence you. So it doesn't work you being a teacher for them and falling in love with their potential. Who's done that before? Falling in love with people's potential. Doesn't it work out? Doesn't it just work out so great? And so, yes, you may see that potential, but it is not your fucking job to be their life coach, their counselor, their therapist, their Reiki master, their whatever. You know, that's what professionals are for. And that's what always cracks me up about this planet, is that so many of us actually would benefit from therapy, from coaching, from spiritual guidance, but we're not taking it because we think we're going to do it on our own, or then we have our friends that we talk to, or all these things. And whether or not we have a supportive system or not, there's people trained in this that can actually help us pinpoint that stuff. But here's the catch. Many of us fear change and transformation because it's difficult. Many of us fear that change and transformation because it's difficult. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's take a breath. First thing I'm inviting you all to write down is mature love. Mature love is being able to listen to someone suffering without feeling threatened or becoming overly empathetically attached. So I'll break that down even more. So mature love is being able to listen to another person's suffering without feeling threatened, but also without becoming empathically attached. And what that means is that often when we're listening to someone suffering, what happens? It triggers something within us, and then we get defensive or we get aggressive. And rather than actually listening to them, we make it about us. And especially in relationships, they'll be saying, well, you did this to me. And then the person's in response, well, you did this to me. And then it just goes downhill from there. We've all done that, I'm sure, at least to one person where we did the one-up game. But the funny thing is that instantly we make it about us rather than actually listening and saying, actually, no, you're right, I did do that to you, and let's explore that, and I'm sorry. And then after you resolve that, then you can bring up your part. And you say, you know what? We tackled one of the things that I did to you. How about let's go into something that I feel really triggered and hurt by, and let's have a conversation about that. But we don't think of it that way. We instantly get the ego triggered, and we become defensive, and we make another person suffering about our suffering. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe we're the opposite. We're the codependent kind, where we're attached. Another person's emotions influences our emotions, and we think we're a good person because of it. Fuck that. Let me repeat that. That was some rich stuff. Wasn't planning to say that. But really think about that for a moment. We feel other people's pain so much, and we get ego gratification out of it, thinking that we're a good person. We are such a good person because we care so much about other people that we lose our emotional equilibrium because of the suffering of the world. Oh, I'm so sympathetic. But then you're just a puddle like everyone else, and you're not actually able to do a damn thing to help anyone when you're also out of alignment. So when we're using other people's non-alignment, when we're using other people's suffering, emotional suffering, as an excuse for our own emotional suffering, that is not helping anyone. You can still be empathetic and sympathetic, and you can still be, a very helpful individual that you think you're being a helpful individual by not taking on other people's pain and collapsing in on with them. Because when you do that, you're matching their frequency, you're matching their vibration. It's triggering ego. But when you're able to hold that space of peaceful awareness, and again, I'm not talking about like the cold detachedness. I'm talking more about unattachment, which we define unattachment in my book, Living Peace, as caring deeply about someone or something, but not letting it influence your emotional equilibrium. Could you imagine? So like I've had so many sessions over these past 10 years, and some like people bring some very, very heavy stuff into those sessions. Could you imagine if I was crying with every single person? I had 6 clients back to back to back. Sometimes I do. And it's like every single client, it'd be like a train hits me. I'm like, oh my God, you poor thing. And then into the next person, oh my God, you poor thing. Or maybe I take the opposite effect and I get angry with them. Because who does that? You hear about something happens to someone and they're unjust, and you get pissed off with them. I would be so drained and I would not be able to do my job if I was so attached to other people's suffering, either getting into the grief with them or the anger with them. Bullshit, 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 bullshit. That is not how you help people, but that's how we're trained to help people. And who do you often call? Rather than come see your neighborhood family pastor and life coach and Zen teacher, Alaric, you call up your friend that's going to agree with you. Who's done that before? Where you have some shitty thing happens to you and you don't want someone to actually tell you, well, let's take a breath with that. No, you want the reaction. You want the person who's going to be like, oh my God, fuck them. Right? We've all done that, including me. And so we often go to the people, rather than not the people who are going to challenge us and to expand our mind. We go to the individuals who are going to reinforce our reality. And we wonder why we're constantly in suffering on a daily basis. And the suffering I'm saying that you're on a daily basis, it may not be extreme. It may just be stress. Just a little bit of stress here and there. It may be just a bit of sadness and grief that you just stuff down with food here and there. Who knows? We all have different ways in which we're stuffing things down. Food's mine. And so, but we all have ways in which we skirt the tough conversations and the tough issues. And probably the reason why I'm able to talk about it so clearly is just because I've seen it so often. I've had many, many students and clients over the years where I'm just like this, just watching through Facebook. We think about it. And that's what's funny is like, you can really tell, maybe you're not always around each other, but you can even tell the alignment of someone based on the posts that they're sharing. It's fascinating. And we often even think that me just sharing happy things constantly is actually me presenting a certain image. But there's psychology behind that, because no one is perfectly in alignment that much of the time. And so whether we think that we're doing a great job by only sharing a certain kind of post, or whether we're full on just sharing everything and being passive aggressive online, there is still wisdom on that. And so that's what's so funny, is that even in this work, it's interesting when you're watching and you're working with people that you're so close to, and you're watching the cycle of neurosis. And again, there's no judgment in that, because I even have that. We all have that. But it is so curious as to where our egos get in the way from us actually asking for help and actually doing the work and actually showing up and saying, you know what? I've had this problem for 20 fucking years and I'm ready for it to be done. But people don't approach it that way. They say, I've had this problem for 20 fucking years and subconsciously, I'm not ready to let it go, because I'm afraid. And so I'll see you in a year, Alaric, or whoever they're working with. Isn't that curious? If you had the teachings and the tools to actually have inner peace in this moment, would you show up and take them? We think that we would, but the truth is many of us don't. And again, I can even vouch for this because there's certain things that I still don't perfectly do. Well, we can never do anything perfectly, but there's still things that I kind of put to the wayside. Isn't that curious? Isn't that curious how we justify our pain? Like the song, Love the Way You Lie. It took two of those people to tango, didn't it? To create that song, to create that relationship, to create our suffering. And yet we remain in it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And it may not even be something necessarily in a relationship, but it might simply just be something in your mind that you're reliving again and again and again and again. Who has a point of suffering in your life that you actually still have from maybe 10, 20, 15, that goes in order, 10, 20, 15 years ago. And you're not ready to let it go. Because if you would be ready to let it go, you'd be on a therapist's couch every single day, showing up and saying, let's get rid of this little thing. And that's exactly what I did. So let's take a breath. So I'm going to read a couple quotes. So back in the day, I was obsessed with Eat, Pray, Love. Just going to put that out there. I love the movie. A lot of people don't necessarily prefer it, but I think the movie Eat, Pray, Love has a lot of juicy wisdom in it. And there's actually a nugget in it that completely changed my life. There is a scene in it, and it's in the book too, but there's a scene in it where she's dancing with her ex-husband. She's in India. She's on her spiritual pilgrimage, and she had this vision of dancing with her husband at their wedding. It was interesting as he's in the suit while she's in the Indian garb, and he was just saying, I miss you. And she said, so miss me. And he said, but I still love you. And she said, so still love me. And every time you think about me, send me love and light and then drop it. Because nothing lasts forever. Not even this. Deep breath. And for whatever reason, that was the thing I needed to hear to let go of my past pain. Because I was carrying a lot of this idea of but I love this person. How could two people be so in love and it not work out? Well, it's life, and love is not the issue there. Peace was the issue. And you had completely two different perceptions on which life path you wanted to walk. So of course it wasn't going to work out. Love had nothing to do with that relationship. But we think that love is the prerequisite for having a happy marriage, for having a happy life. But the truth is, peace is the prerequisite for having a happy marriage, having a happy life. Because there's so many people that are in really fucked up situations, and there's love there. There's nothing wrong with that. Think of even just families that are abusive to each other. Think of how many of you have had at least some form of abuse from your parents. And they did love you in their own way, but they didn't have inner peace. And so it was manifesting in different ways. And think of how you, as a parent, some of you here, have really love for your children. We've also probably damaged them a bit. We all have. You can't not smudge up their little glass. They're this beautiful little glass, and you just little fingerprints on it. Sometimes we drop it, and it's okay. There is no judgment there, but there needs to be an understanding that we do these things to people. And we do these things out of our desperation for love, out of our desperation to feel a sense of security, out of our desperation for what we don't realize is actually peace. And so I love this quote by Elizabeth Gilbert. In desperate love, we always invent the characters of our partners, demanding they be what we need of them, and then feeling devastated when they refuse to perform the role we created in the first place. This can be applied to children as well. It could be applied to friends. It could be applied to anything and anyone. We decide who they are to us. And we get pissed off when they don't match it. That is complete self-centeredness. And so really, even when people betray our trust, we decided that they were trustworthy when probably the red flags were there from the beginning. You're not a scorpion, you're a fluffy bunny. And then you get stung and you're like, how dare you? And the person's like, I've been this way the whole time. You have just been in your own delusion and you're all falling in love with my potential. Thank you. And then you add to their pain because then you probably react to them in a negative way. and you saying, you could be a better person than this. How dare you do that to you? You hurt me. And the person's like, I've always been this person. Granted, they don't actually think this, but they're like, I've always been this person. And so you're falling in love with their potential actually hurts them more, because often it falls apart and then you'll react. And so there's just another person that's reinforcing their negative reality, because there's another person that saw their potential, but then they couldn't live up to it and then doesn't like them anymore. And then it leads to emotional arguments and all these fun things, rather than being able to maintain your own alignment and peace and being able to have healthy conversations. And even before you get into it with someone, you see the red flag and you just say, hey, I see these red flags. And although I'm desperate for love and affection, like most of us, I realize that this, will lead to some conflict down the road. And so I'll be your friend, I'll be your friend, but let's not get into romance with this. Let's not get into romance with this. And isn't that what I did to you? Disclaimer up front, man. Yep. An emotional prenup.
Yeah.
And literally, like, for the first 3 months, every month, I would say, it's okay to leave. I know you're signing up for this big thing here. Because again, I'm not that at the time I was necessarily a pastor, but I was a pastor before, and I was always some form of leading community. So I didn't come with like a child. I came with like 50 people. Like, welcome to the community. And you're going to be the first lady of this community, first gentleman. And so it's a lot to handle. And so I said, like, for my job, I work with people's emotions for a living. And so this is not necessarily just a want, it's a necessity that I'm with a partner that can have their own emotional equilibrium. I cannot be your own happiness. I cannot be your own sense of love. I cannot be your own sense of peace. I could be your partner, but I can't be these things for you, and I'm not going to be the one that teaches it to you. And this is something you're going to have to show up to the occasion for. And he did, instantly. You want to share a few words on how it intimidated you, but you're just like, yes.
Oh, yeah. The first time I ever came to your center and I saw all the cars parked out front, I was like, what am I getting into? Because I was not like a big group person. And before coming to this, I was part of a Unitarian church. And by a part of, I mean, I would arrive 2 minutes before it started. I would sit in the back row. No one would talk to me. I would get what I needed out of it and I would run. And so I just was not, so I was looking for spiritual things, but I just wasn't connecting. And then, when I showed up and you told me that, and but we had both been through so many different kinds of relationships where we had compromised. So by the time we met on our first date, we both just said, okay, this is what I'm looking for. And if that's not what, then let's just call it good. And so, we both really had to step up to that. Yeah.
And so it's almost like we're afraid to do that. And so we'll wait to like actually give the disclaimers until 3 or 6 months in, after you develop a bond and an attachment. And then you're just like, okay, they're not going to run away now. That's not a healthy approach. If you're saving like the biggest things 3 months, 6 months into it, what you're doing is you're lying about yourself and you're putting on a false mask. And so it's necessary to be upfront within those first 2 weeks about the things. You don't necessarily have to go on the first date like I did, but it's helpful to just say, this is who I am and this is where I'm at and this is what I'm looking for. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating that we're taught the opposite, to where it's like, wait till you love each other and you're emotionally bonded and attached and then tell them about all these secrets. No, now they're stuck. That's not healthy. And you wonder why it doesn't work out.
Yeah. One example that sticks to my mind, and this was pretty near the beginning. I remember one time we went and we had dinner and you were looking a little anxious.
Oh yeah.
And so we were talking and you said, I never want to have children. And I know you're a teacher and I know you have you love kids, but you just said, I cannot have children with what I want to do. I want to give my work to the practice. And we hope to have a foster home one day. We hope to always be working with kids. But you just said it's not in the cards for me to have an actual child. And if you want children, tell me now. And because I don't want 5-10 years down the line, or even you saying right now, but no, that's fine. And then 5 years from now, suddenly you say, I want a kid, and it won't work. But that was a big one.
And I love that. And thank you for
Mhm.
bringing that up, because I'm the
Mhm.
type of person, like if you want to have a kid tomorrow, I'd say, I support your journey. You know, we'd have to go separate ways, but I'll support your journey, you know? And that's something that we don't think about when we're deciding to get married to someone. We just figure it out as we go along, but that's not necessarily the healthiest way to approach it. And maybe it was for you. It works out for some people. But in a lot of instances, this is why the divorce rate is so freaking high. And not only one divorce, but 2 divorces, 3 divorces, 4 divorces, 5 divorces. It keeps increasing sometimes. And again, there's no judgment with that. But again, we're approaching it from such a unique angle that we don't really think about these long-term things because we don't have self-awareness. Think about that. If you actually know who you are and where you stand on things and what you really want in life, you're not going to fall into the trap of just molding to someone's life or them accidentally molding to yours. But if you actually say, these are my values and this is what I'm going to show up and do, then you can respect other people's journeys, even if it hurt. If he said his highest excitement is to have children, I would say, you know, I love you, but let's not get married. You know, let's not go down this road. I love you enough to let you go. Because the 2-year relationship the guy wanted to marry me prior, his highest excitement was to have children. And guess what we fought about constantly? Interesting, huh? And he always thought I'd change my mind. So breathe that in. Deep stuff. I have this other really good juicy quote. Let me see what time it is real quick. Woo! Okay. This is another quote by Elizabeth Gilbert, Eat, Pray, Love. And it's just kind of like a story of what we do. If I love you, I will carry for you all of your pain. I will assume for you all of your debts in every definition of the word. I will protect you from your own insecurity. I will protect upon you all sorts of good qualities that you have never actually cultivated in yourself. And I will buy Christmas presents for your entire family. I will give you the sun and the rain. And if they are not available, I will give you sun checks and rain checks. I will give you all of this and more until I get so exhausted and depleted that the only way I can recover my energy is by becoming infatuated with someone else. I remember doing that. I remember doing that years and years ago. First relationship. The only way I can recover my energy is to become infatuated with someone else. And so we jump from relationship to relationship to relationship, promising the sun and the stars and the moon and everything in between. And then we get exhausted and depleted. And we get angry because we had these expectations of what it would look like. And we thought that by me giving everything, they would give everything and that it would even out. But then at the end of it, we just have to move on to the next abuse and the next abuse and the next abuse. And we don't realize that by giving everything of ourselves, that it is abuse, not only to ourselves, but to other people, where we're enabling codependency. And that's why we have such strong boundaries here at the Zen Cowboy. You know, that's why, you know, even though we're very casual and we have a lot of fun, if people bring in a certain vibe, or not really of a vibe, if they are being disrespectful, or if there is some chaos energy or anything that's going on, it's not about being judgmental of it. It's about accepting that in this moment, that is not a place for this right here, right now. And that's okay. Now, if we don't accept that and we try and see the potential of it, then we're not accepting the reality that it's not a place for it right here, right now. And that was one of the hardest things I had to learn in this field of work, is that I had to let go. Fire is a strong word, but I've had to fire clients before. I've had to kick out students of my program before. I've had to even kick out members of my past community before. And that was one of the most difficult things as an empath to do. But because they weren't interested in actually doing the teachings, they were interested in whatever their own thoughts about them were, there was not a harmony. And that's what people don't realize, that they think that these teachings are about pure acceptance of no matter what happens. And that's the funny thing. And here's a really clever point. It is about full acceptance. And when you fully accept a scorpion for scorpion, you will not bring it in with the rabbits. And you will say, you will shift the teachings to meet them with where they're at. But if they're not willing to meet you with where they're at, then it's not a place for it. But think about that. I once did that where I was just so accepting of everyone. I thought that was the highest enlightenment that you can do, that I was accepting and dating people that were actually not for me. Because I wanted to prove to myself that I could date anyone. And then it turned into one of the most chaos things ever, and very abusive, because it wasn't a match. And so traditionally in Zen teachers, it took a very long ass time for them to accept you as a student, because they made sure that you had all your ducks in a row. People think that you could just go to a monastery like that. The truth is you can't. They will deny you and deny you and deny you and deny you until you get all your shit together, because they know that if you don't have your shit together, you're bringing that shit into the monastery, and it's not going to be about the teachings. It's going to be about you healing your shit. And you're not going to even be able to listen to the teachings because you're so caught up in your past. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? And so we have this construed view of spirituality, especially of New Age spirituality, that it means like if I walk into this door, people sometimes come here, they walk in and then they just think that they can do whatever the fuck they want. There's no rules. But there has to be some structure. Otherwise, places like this can't fully exist. And that's how we teach respect. That's how we teach peace. That's how we teach that we're responsible for our own emotional well-being, not anyone else. And so when you come together in a group of people that all understand that we are together responsible for our emotional well-being, we're not projecting our own opinions and biases on everyone around us. And that's why a lot of the times that you see so much chaos in churches, in spiritual communities, especially in the New Age spiritual communities, they constantly implode within themselves because there is not necessarily a structure. And we're almost afraid of structure because we have so much structure over here. We may have been brought up in a ridiculously structured environment, be it political, religious, or cultural, that we just want to push it all away. But the truth is, structure wasn't necessarily the, whatever word I'm looking for, bad thing. I'm sorry. I don't prefer using that word because it's duality, but it wasn't necessarily the bad thing. It was the abuse with it. But when you actually develop self-discipline and structure within yourself, that is the gateway to freedom. Because who here has been super casual in a relationship or just anything? You've been really casual with something, and you notice that your emotions flowed with that casualness. And you notice that in your casualness of not having a self-discipline or a spiritual practice, that your peace went out the window, that your eating went out the window, that your ability to communicate with relationships went out the window, your boundaries were out the window. All these things were out the window because you wanted to just be free. But the funny thing is that the more structure you have within your own spiritual practice and your own self-discipline, not to the point of judgment, you're in emotional control. You have emotional mastery. And when you have emotional mastery, when you master your emotions, you're free. You are no longer triggered by life itself. And you no longer feel threatened by everyone around you and their own suffering. And you no longer become collapsed by everyone's suffering. And you're able to show up and hold space. That is freedom, not the over-attachment to things. Deep breath. So in conclusion, stop using other people's suffering as an excuse for you to suffer. Stop using other people's love or your sense of love for other people as your excuse to suffer. You cannot get from here to there. You can't get from suffering to peace from that perception. You have to focus on your own peace. Show up, do the work, get some training, get some teaching, get some coaching. Actually really work with people that can help tear yourself apart. Allow yourself to be annihilated, and then you can bring yourself back up. Fascinating, isn't it? And so with that, we take a deep breath and we release. Thank you, everyone watching from home or wherever you're at on the interweb. We appreciate you for joining in today, and we do really, we really benefit from your donations. And so if you do enjoy watching these videos, even if you just donate a little bit here and there, it really makes an impact on helping our community thrive and also helping us upgrade our poor quality sound. So I'm sorry if the sound kind of came in and out, but donations and all that fun stuff really helps support the equipment that we can eventually get. So links are down below for any training or coaching that you might like and any donations you'd like to give. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.